Hey everyone, I'm finally back with another update. For this weekly roundup, we're diving into May 2nd through May 8th. We're looking at a high stakes naval maneuver in the Strait of Hormuz known as Project Freedom, a domestic war on fraud that is uncovering hundreds of billions in waste, and a Supreme Court sanctioned redrawing of the American political map that could change the balance of power for a generation. From the Wall of Steel in the Middle East to the investigations of feeding program fraud in Minnesota, the administration is moving on all cylinders. Let's get into it. Today, we'll start with the situation in the Middle East, which has reached a boiling point. President Trump officially launched Project Freedom, which is a massive naval operation designed to guide neutral, innocent cargo ships safely through the Strait of Hormuz, a waterway that has been effectively turned into a war zone by Iranian aggression. The scale of this mission is staggering. CENTCOM deployed a wall of steel consisting of guided missile destroyers, over 100 land and sea-based aircraft, and 15,000 service members. Admiral Brad Cooper confirmed that while the U.S. is maintaining a strict naval blockade on Iran, they are using force to guarantee freedom of navigation for the rest of the world. Trump described this as a humanitarian gesture because hundreds of ships carrying food, fertilizer, and energy were trapped in the Arabian Gulf, unable to transit due to Iranian threats. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent pointed out that this isn't just about oil, it's about the LPG India uses to cook and the fertilizer the world needs to grow food. Unfortunately, the escort was not peaceful, and the U.S. eliminated several Iranian small boats or Mosquito Fleet vessels that tried to interfere with commercial shipping. Trump notably called these strikes a love tap, an exercise in self-defense where Iranian military facilities were targeted, and their boats were sent to the bottom of the sea, while U.S. forces reported zero damage. Iran is reportedly facing a natural explosion of its oil industry because they've run out of storage and are being forced to dump millions of barrels into the Gulf. The pressure does appear to be working, as reports indicate we are on the verge of a memorandum of understanding. The proposed deal would include a uranium enrichment moratorium, commitments against nuclear weapons, enhanced inspections, and reopening the strait. The administration paused Project Freedom for a limited time at the request of countries like Pakistan to test whether a broader agreement could be reached, while the naval blockade remained fully in effect. President Trump confirmed Iran has agreed it cannot possess a nuclear weapon and revealed the regime was approximately 2 weeks from developing one prior to U.S. action. Additional U.S. strikes targeted Iranian vessels attempting to breach the blockade, including disabling a tanker's rudder. Secretary Bessent noted that Gulf countries bombed by Iran have provided extensive information enabling the freezing of Iranian assets, and China was publicly urged to use its influence as a major buyer of Iranian oil. Throughout the week, U.S. forces maintained superiority, with Iran walking back some claims of successful strikes. As Secretary of State Marco Rubio put it, Iran has two choices: pursuing reconstruction and stability or facing isolation and defeat. Rubio also confirmed that major combat operations under Operation Epic Fury had concluded. Shifting focus to the domestic front, the airline industry is in a state of chaos following the official shutdown of Spirit Airlines, which sparked a fierce political firestorm. It's a textbook example of elite incompetence destroying working-class opportunities. Administration officials, including Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy and Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, are laying the blame squarely on Senator Elizabeth Warren and the Biden-era Department of Justice. In 2024, the DOJ sued to block a merger between JetBlue and Spirit, a move Warren cheered as a win for flyers. At the time, Warren argued that the Big Four airlines, American, Delta, Southwest, and United, already controlled approximately 75% of the U.S. market, and that the merger would lead to fewer choices and higher prices for consumers. Fast forward to today, Spirit has collapsed and over 17,000 American jobs have been destroyed. Secretary Duffy called the denial of that merger a massive mistake, arguing that if the market said a merger was necessary for the airline's health, the government should have allowed it. Now, the working class is feeling the sting, as industry experts suggest that the lack of competition from Spirit could push airfares up by as much as $100. Chris Sununu, the president of Airlines for America, noted that President Trump tried 100 different ways to save the airline in its final months, but the damage from the blocked merger was already done. It's a stark example of how regulatory decisions can have devastating real-world consequences for employees and consumers alike. One of the most aggressive pillars of the current administration is the domestic war on fraud. We are seeing a coordinated effort to clean up government programs that have been exploited for years. Leading the charge is CMS Administrator Dr. Oz, who recently identified a jaw-dropping $100 billion in fraud within Medicare and Medicaid alone. He argues that by eliminating this waste, the government could double the life expectancy of the Medicare Trust Fund, and we've already seen results. 450 fraudulent hospice centers in Los Angeles were shut down. Some of these centers were billing Medicare millions of dollars for patients who never even spoke to a doctor. Then there's the crackdown on SNAP or food stamp fraud, with Agriculture Secretary Brooke Rollins announcing a major retailer purge. Before this, stores could count jelly as fruit and jerky as protein to meet requirements, but now they must stock real, nutritious food and accept taxpayer dollars. This isn't just policy, it's criminal enforcement. Nearly 1,000 arrests have been made, targeting luxury car drivers and Somali fraudsters who were found double-dipping or receiving benefits while driving Lamborghinis, which leads us to the high-profile investigation into Representative Ilhan Omar. Omar is allegedly entangled in a $250 million fraud scheme involving Feeding Our Future in Minnesota, and she is refusing to hand over all documents regarding her involvement in the scandal to the Minnesota Fraud Committee. Court documents reportedly mention her name multiple times in connection with the ringleader of the theft, which was meant to feed hungry children during the pandemic. While Minnesota Democrats have blocked state-level subpoenas, calls for federal subpoenas and even her expulsion from Congress are mounting. Speaking of Minnesota, the state is under federal investigation by the Anti-Fraud Task Force, led by Vice President Vance. Governor Tim Walz is facing criticism for protecting fraudsters, as Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche revealed Walz is suing to block the investigation. Perhaps the most significant long-term shift is happening in our courtrooms and state legislatures. Following a series of Supreme Court rulings, the era of racial gerrymandering is being dismantled in favor of colorblind redistricting. The Supreme Court pummeled attempts by liberal justices to block these changes, and Justice Samuel Alito was particularly pointed, calling the dissent from Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson baseless and insulting. The administration's position is clear. Maps should be based on partisan politics and geography, not race. This isn't just about lines on the map. It's about a fundamental realignment of political power in the South, moving away from what the administration calls racist seats toward a more unified Republican delegation. In states like Tennessee, Louisiana, and Alabama, new maps are being fast-tracked for the 2026 midterms, and the impact is expected to be a massive Republican surge. Tennessee has already signed a 9-0 Republican map that effectively eliminates the state's last Democrat-held seat, with Governor Bill Lee signing the map despite chaotic protests on the House floor that saw some representatives being removed by officers. Tennessee State Representative Justin Pearson was caught on camera intimidating a state trooper during the chaos, and in response, Representative Tim Burchett called for jail time for Pearson. The Virginia State Supreme Court struck down the Democrats' map that would have left only one GOP congressional seat, and in Florida, Governor Ron DeSantis has signed a map expected to add 4 new Republican seats. South Carolina, Alabama, Louisiana, and Mississippi took steps toward redrawing maps, with South Carolina considering a delay of primaries to accommodate changes. On the home front, momentum is building. The Department of Justice charged 4 non-citizens for voting illegally in New Jersey elections in 2020, 2022, and 2024. Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche described this as part of a 24,000% increase in such prosecutions compared to the prior administration, and indicated more cases are expected. North Carolina, a swing state, discovered around 34,000 dead people still on voter rolls, and Minnesota's automatic registration under walls received extra scrutiny. Meanwhile, Scott Presler traveled to Alaska to pressure Senator Lisa Murkowski and advance the Save America Act, emphasizing proof of citizenship, photo voter ID, and the elimination of ranked choice voting to ensure one vote equals one ballot. Washington Post analysis indicated that requiring citizenship verification would have flipped New Mexico to Trump and made several other traditionally blue states significantly more competitive, potentially increasing his electoral college total to 317. Separately, a federal judge ruled that the Trump DOJ can retain over 600 ballot boxes seized by the FBI in Fulton County, Georgia, with no requirement to return the election materials. The White House held several events last week, including a small business event during which an armed individual near the White House fired shots right after Vice President Vance's motorcade rolled through. Secret Service returned fire on the armed individual, and an innocent bystander was hit by the suspect. The suspect was struck, and both the suspect and the bystander are receiving treatment at the hospital. Luckily, no one else was injured, and the small business event was still a success. The White House hosted a presidential fitness test event on the lawn with Bryson DeChambeau, Gary Player, Secretaries Hegseth and Kennedy, and kids. The event promoted the revival of the presidential fitness test and youth health amid alarming obesity and military disqualification rates. President Trump interacted with the kids by showing them the Trump YMCA dance and giving them golf lessons. The kids also participated in a youth sprint with the Washington Nationals mascots dressed up as former presidents, and Bryson DeChambeau performed pull-ups on the lawn. President Trump and First Lady Melania participated in an event honoring Gold Star moms and Angel moms ahead of Mother's Day, during which President Trump gave a shout-out to White House Chief of Staff Susie Wiles for being the first woman ever to serve as White House Chief of Staff, and he thanked her for her amazing work. Trump personally greeted the mothers, with Vice President Vance and Second Lady Usha also in attendance. In a heartwarming moment, the mother of Staff Sergeant Andrew Wolf, who was shot in the head by an Afghan national in D.C., announced that Wolf is enjoying being home from the hospital and is playing golf again. She said he does have another surgery coming up in September, but that she has no doubt he'll be 100% back to Andrew within a few years, independent, thriving, and being a young bachelor again. President Trump held a surprise Oval Office visit with fighters ahead of the June 14th UFC America 250 fight on the White House lawn, and he welcomed the president of Brazil to the White House for a bilateral meeting during which they discussed trade and tariffs, security and crime, critical minerals and economic partnerships, and broader regional and global issues. The closed-door talks lasted about 3 or 4 hours, and a planned joint press appearance in the Oval Office was canceled, leading to some speculation of tensions, but both sides later described the meeting positively. Now it's time for the noteworthy tidbits, which are brought to you today by Big Fork Brands. Let me tell you about them quick. Sometimes I get on a roll cleaning or gardening, and I need a boost but don't have time for a meal. Big Fork Brand's pork jerky is the perfect choice to keep my momentum, offering high-protein snacks for on-the-go energy boosts. Not only do they offer pork jerky, but they also make pork sticks, bacon sausage, bacon hot dogs, and burger and hot dog sauces. Products come in a variety of delicious flavors, including Thai green curry and maple and brown sugar for the meat options, and gangster and Chicago fire for the sauces. I personally think the original flavor of the pork jerky hits just right after tackling a big chore. It's a little salty and very flavorful. My discount code gives you 20% off your entire order, and it's currently the best deal available. Just visit bigforkbrands.com and enter in my promo code JADE, that's J-A-D-E, at checkout. All right, let's get back to the tidbits. President Trump confirmed he will be pulling over 5,000 troops from Germany and may move some of those troops to Poland. FBI Director Kash Patel confirmed China is purchasing land near sensitive American sites to spy on the U.S. government, and President Trump is expected to arrive in Beijing Wednesday morning to discuss trade and tariffs, Taiwan, technology, Iran, and economic issues. Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton moved against birthright citizenship tourism operations. Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy reported revoking 28,000 illegal commercial driver's licenses and removing 20,000 drivers from service for English proficiency issues. The Justice Department advanced denaturalization proceedings for individuals who obtained citizenship through fraud or other disqualifying conduct. Representative Pramila Jayapal is facing calls to be stripped of her committees or expelled after she bragged about helping train over 30,000 resistors who may have been involved in riots and obstructed law enforcement. Rudy Giuliani was hospitalized in critical condition with pneumonia but showed miraculous improvement, leaving the ICU after receiving prayers from across the nation. Secretary of State Marco Rubio conducted diplomatic meetings, including with Pope Leo at the Vatican, and he filled in as White House press secretary. Intel deal profits for the U.S. government reached $30 to $45 billion. Spencer Pratt gained ground in the Los Angeles mayoral race against incumbent Karen Bass, which, speaking of Karen Bass, James O'Keefe released a video of Bass's officials speaking on hidden camera about how Bass knew the Palisades fires were coming, but Bass left the country anyways. Sadly, 2 U.S. Army soldiers went missing in Morocco. They were there for a training exercise, but were off duty on a recreational hike when they apparently fell from a cliff into the ocean. The remains of First Lieutenant Kendrick Lamont Key Jr. have been recovered, and search efforts continue for the second soldier. War Secretary Pete Hegseth pinned the Soldiers and Airmen's Medal on Major Ryan Reynolds and Major Edwin Stanfield for their heroic actions back in November. Lethal drugs coming into the United States by sea have plummeted 97% thanks to the narco-terrorist strikes. Secretary Hegseth established a Pentagon task force to give pay and benefits to unvaccinated service members removed under Biden, even if they aren't returning to service. Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche confirmed the DOJ's criminal case against James Comey is not solely about the 8647 Instagram post alone, but said he's not permitted to get into the details of what the grand jury heard or found. The Department of Justice advanced antitrust actions in the meatpacking industry aimed at addressing price pressures and manipulation. President Trump personally visited the crew restoring the Lincoln Memorial Reflecting Pool, a project expected to be completed at a fraction of prior projected costs and timelines. Vivek Ramaswamy secured a dominant victory in the Ohio Republican gubernatorial primary, winning 100% of Ohio counties. In the Indiana Republican primaries, Trump-endorsed challengers scored major victories by defeating at least 5 and possibly 6 of the 7 incumbent state senators who had voted against a Trump-backed congressional redistricting plan last year. The FBI executed court-authorized search warrants at the Portsmouth, Virginia office of Democratic State Senator L. Louise Lucas, president pro tempore of the Virginia Senate, a cannabis retail business she co-owns, and other associated locations. This is part of an ongoing federal corruption and bribery probe involving marijuana and/or cannabis dispensary businesses, and multiple sources indicate the investigation originated during the Biden administration, not as a new Trump-era action. Lucas was not arrested or charged. The federal government is suing the New York Times for discriminating against a white male for a top role in the company, giving the role to a non-white female who was provably unqualified instead. Clarence Thomas became the second longest-serving Supreme Court justice in U.S. history. According to the Associated Press, Trump's pharmaceutical deals could save the United States economy $529 billion over the next 10 years. A federal aviation employee was criminally charged for threatening to assassinate President Trump. Vice President Vance traveled to Iowa to campaign for Republican U.S. Representative Zach Nunn ahead of the competitive 2026 midterm elections. Vance spoke at a manufacturing facility in Des Moines alongside Nunn, emphasizing Trump administration priorities like trade and tariffs, the economy, agriculture, including support for year-round E15 ethanol, and working-class issues. President Trump revealed he wants to surge federal personnel to Chicago, New York City, and San Francisco to address crime, and federal agents carried out a massive raid against fentanyl and meth suppliers at MacArthur Park in Los Angeles. 300 federal and local agents stormed the area, seizing enough fentanyl to kill around 190,000 people. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick voluntarily appeared and testified on Epstein before the House Oversight Committee, with Pam Bondi and Bill Gates scheduled to testify soon as well. Also in Epstein news, a federal judge ordered the unsealing of his purported suicide note, which he apparently wrote in a Manhattan jail. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis signed a new law to ban the Council of American Islamic Relations, or CARE, and the Muslim Brotherhood from pouring their funds into Florida organizations, as they are both considered terror organizations. In Texas, Governor Greg Abbott defeated CARE in the courts, so the group must turn over their donor lists and the CARE chief's travel records to 9 countries hosting Islamic terror. Eli Lilly announced an additional $4.5 billion investment across its manufacturing sites in Indiana, with their total commitments now standing at $21 billion. TPUSA journalist Savannah Hernandez officially filed a civil suit against the family that assaulted her at an anti-ICE protest. FBI Director Kash Patel confirmed the FBI lied to federal activist judges to illegally spy on the Donald Trump campaign explaining that Democrats sought foreign intel assets to drum up fraudulent information. The U.S. Air Force is moving to finalize President Trump's new Air Force One Boeing 747 on July 4th, gifted by Qatar. In a major diplomatic breakthrough, President Trump negotiated a 3-day ceasefire and a 2,000-person prisoner swap between Russia and Ukraine. President Trump set a hard deadline for the European Union to cut their tariffs to zero or face much higher levels by America's 250th birthday. Over a dozen top D.C. police officials were placed on leave for allegedly manipulating crime data. They were reportedly turning assault with a dangerous weapon into reckless endangerment and theft into lost property to make the city look safer than it actually was. White House Chief of Staff Susie Wiles was awarded the Independent Women's Barbara K. Olson Woman of Valor Award. The WHO assured the public that the hantavirus is not the next coronavirus. Congratulations are in order for White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt, who gave birth to her baby girl after working throughout her pregnancy. Texas Judge Rosie Speedlin Gonzalez was banned for life from serving on the bench again after she unlawfully ordered an attorney to be handcuffed. President Trump endorsed Representative Mike Lawler out of New York in the 2026 midterm. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis banned AI data centers from using water needed by citizens during a drought, and the law also bans utility companies from charging higher prices due to the data centers. President Trump ordered the release of the first batch of UFO/UAP government files, fulfilling a transparency commitment. You can find them at war.gov/UFO. Lastly, the Charlie Kirk murder trial judge ruled that cameras are allowed into the courtroom for the full trial. That wraps up our recap of May 2nd through May 8th, 2026. From the naval blockades in the Gulf to the redrawn districts of the South, the America First strategy is being implemented with unprecedented speed. It is a policy of maximum pressure aimed at domestic cleanup and global dominance. We'll be watching the Strait of Hormuz closely for that final agreement and tracking the fraud investigations as they move into the federal courts. What stood out most to you this week? I'd say drop your thoughts on X, but the AI bots have been too aggressive with their flagging and they think I'm not a real person. So until my appeal goes through, drop your thoughts on Instagram at Shades of Jade Pod. Also, share this podcast with a friend this week. Until next time, thank you for listening and have a great day.